Following some breaking news now out of Miami. This is a live look at police on the scene where a man has barricaded himself and may be armed. Police tell us officers responded to a call from a woman requesting help. SWAT team arrived a short time ago. A negotiator also on the scene there trying to make contact with the man inside.
SWAT team officers caught on video outside this home. A SWAT standoff lasting hours culminated with gunshots. SWAT members fired at the suspect who barricaded himself inside his apartment.
High liability police work. So as we continue our conversation and deal with the issues of officer wellness, we wanted to take a closer look, a deeper dive into SWAT operators, SWAT commanders. We all see their actions. We all see their performance on TV, dramatization of SWAT callouts, SWAT engagements. But what we don't see is the impact to the SWAT officers, the SWAT commanders, the people that are involved in those team operations. Today on Bets and Badges, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest, Frank Fernandez, a City of Miami police veteran who retired after 30 years as a police major and now serves as the Assistant Chief of the City of Sweetwater Police Department. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this topic. It's such an important thing that we need to speak about, so I appreciate this opportunity.
Good deal. I am Robert Asencio, and with me is my colleague and co-host, retired police chief and military historian, David Magnusson. Hey, David.
Hey, this is going to be a great show. Listen, first of all, world of respect and admiration for this gentleman right here. We go back a long way. I consider him a good friend, but he speaks from the heart. He's the real deal. So listen to what he's going to tell us, all of us, because we're going to learn something.
So what I didn't mention was that you too were not just a SWAT operator, but then became SWAT commander, right? You spent about 12 years as an operator and about several more as a commander. Let's get right into a story so we can break this out and talk about the wellness and what's happening in the law enforcement community.
Sure. Again, thank you for having me here today. It's humbling to be surrounded by you gentlemen. But the reason I'm here is because I am passionate about SWAT officers. I am passionate about what they do, and I'm passionate about what they do after they retire, to include their well-being. I feel, this day and age, there's not enough awareness as it relates to officers that are exposed to daily high liability incidents and what occurs from the time they join a SWAT team until they exit the SWAT team, and absolutely nothing is happening. So, I personally have been involved in over 475 missions, SWAT missions. All of those are high liability high risk missions, to include barricaded subjects, hostage taking, high risk search warrants, and dignitary protection details. It's a combined number. But, I have my good days and I have my bad days. And so there are incidents that will always, remain with you, pop up from time to time. You think about it.
Well, let's dive into that, right? Because we want the viewer to get a visual perspective of what a SWAT, one of the worst can be, and how it stays with you, so we can get into the conversation of wellness.
Sure. There are many that come to mind, but there are a few that really stick with me. I'll speak about one particular. We're talking about approximately 15 years ago. Responded to a call out in the Flagami part of the city of Miami, where a gentleman was barricaded in a house. Patrol arrived and was able to observe this young person pacing back and forth inside the residence with a shotgun in his hand. At the time, the police had responded to check on the well-being of the family. They hadn't heard from the family in a few days, and they wanted the police to go check. So Police officer arrives, sees the juvenile with a weapon in his hand, and the call activation starts. We respond, we regroup, we arrive. This is probably about 10 o'clock in the morning. And long story short, negotiations occur with this young person, and closer to 9, 10 o'clock at night, the decision was made to make entry into the location. Negotiations have failed. The young person had gone silent on us, so it was time to make a move and enter the residence. I remember being part of the entry team. I remember, breaching that front door, stepping into that residence, and immediately ending up on the ground, something very, very slippery. Well, it ended up being that this young man had murdered his grandmother and his sister in the residence, and some of those bodies were already decomposing. And what I had fell on was a body. At that point, I realized what had happened. I stood up, and I remember not being able to catch my balance because it was so slippery. There had been, body fluid all across tile floor. And as you can imagine, it was extremely slippery, and I felt tactically disadvantaged at that point because I couldn't get a good platform to be able to defend myself if I had to. I wasn't the only officer that took that fall. All three of us in that entry team, the initial entry team, took that fall. Long story short, we continued to search the house and came across the young sister who had also been shot and killed by this gentleman. And as we made entry into the last room, which was a bathroom of the house, we discovered that he had taken a shotgun to himself and had killed himself. Apparently, his shot was masked by our deployment of chemical agents. It was all simultaneous, so we never heard when this took place, but it did take place, and it'll stick with me forever because not only did I deal with seeing with what I thought was very difficult. I saw a dog in the residence, consuming one of the bodies, eating one of the bodies. And I'll never forget that little dog. It was a white dog. I could see the fluids in his whiskers. And so came out of the residence. We cleared the residence, got decontaminated by the fire department, got hosed down in the middle of the street, and went home like nothing, like we always did. We debriefed about the tactics that night, what we did, what we could have done better, and we all went home. The next day, my son comes home from school and told me, "Dad, you're not going to believe what happened to one of our classmates." And then it just so happened that the young lady that was the victim, one of the victims, was a classmate of my son. So that impacted me personally.
Wow. Brings it totally full circle to your family. David, you as a retired police chief, also served in the city of Miami Police. You also remember or have function with the SWAT team, right? A number of different jobs,
the
right?
Tactical Operations Section, which included the SWAT team, yes.
So in talking to these operators, these officers, the commanders that are going in on these scenes, I suspect you saw everything, right? Because you're right there, first person, your entry, you're going through the scene. Your job is to go after the threat, but also clear the scene. So you have to do visual inspection. So you're seeing all this firsthand, right? Undisturbed. Did you guys ever talk about like what these officers are going through or what they just went through?
What I have always perceived, because in the tactical ops, there was a lot of different high liability units. SWAT team was the most squared away of all of them. They were just a bunch of very squared away law enforcement professionals. Now, do you take advantage of that? Perhaps a little bit and say, okay, they got it, they're good, because they are that good. Taking a step back, what we talked about earlier, the shows, right? SWAT and everything. Mm-hmm. SWAT on a TV production is not going to show any of the people slipping on body fluids or going home and their child is telling them, one of their classmates was taken. It's got to get wrapped up in 60 minutes. This is not a 60 minutes episode here in real life. And it compounds from one to the other. Like I said, they are the best. The Miami SWAT team, and perhaps I'm a little tainted on that, is the best that in the nation. Some may argue otherwise, but that's fine. It's a good discussion that we have, because it's all about the men and women that serve in units like this, right? But it compounds. Who do they talk to? If there was a shooting, yes, they would have to go talk to somebody, obviously, okay? But most of the time, it's not a shooting. And the drama that takes place, the internal drama, the internal trauma, and I didn't mean drama, trauma that takes place inside of these men and women, it doesn't go away on its own. And years later, you know, here you have Francisco telling us it still sticks with him, just like I'm sure it does with other people that are part of that unit or any other in the street high liability unit that has seen the worst of the worst and has to gear up for it constantly, never knowing when that call's coming.
Yeah, so 475 missions. How do you deal with that, brother? I mean, talk to us. Look, we have an audience that is a mixed audience. We have those that are in police, those that are military, but also general public. So let's give them a understanding, because this is a team effort, right?
Sure.
How do you deal with that?
So how do I deal with it as a person? How have I been dealing with it since those early days in the SWAT team? Well, I always found support in family. I always surrounded myself with solid family foundation. You also got to have a way out. You have to have something else other than police work. You have to involve yourself in, you know, something you love, something you're passionate about, not just day in and day out. And you can get really, really easily, you know, focus so much in your job that you forget about your passions and the things that you love to do. For example, I'm a musician. I play drums. So I found therapy through music. You know, it's what I'm passionate about. I fly. I'm a pilot. I love flying. When I'm flying an airplane, I think about nothing else except flying that airplane. So you have to find a way to do other things that are meaningful. You have to find relationships that are meaningful, and be very careful about what or who you associate with, because destructive behavior is not the answer, and it can be an element of, you know, disaster downrange. So you have to stay involved. So, but now as a leader, and having the ability to make decisions, it's more important of me now that I know what officers are going through, to make sure that we create and foster the environment that an officer can reach out for help. You know, make sure that peer support's there, make sure that we have access to programs like Struggle Well, make sure that we engage these officers on a daily basis and with minimal conversations, not just operational types of topics. So I believe that the issue is much bigger.
Well, let me ask you a question, because, you know, I'm so impressed that you say that now as a leader, you're aware and you're instituting what wasn't there for you before. Well, take it, right? Don't let me put words into your mouth. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely right.
You know, you're caring for your officers by hands-on involvement with them. But let's talk about something that's a little step back. What is the impact to officers that are continuously, day after day, the one that you were talking about, David, the compounded trauma? I mean, how is it manifesting in them? Can you give an example of how these memories mess with your head, and what happens and what goes through your mind?
Well, you'll see law enforcement in general, that you'll see a high incidence of alcoholism. You'll see a high incidence of divorce. You'll see officers that, you know, spiral down into, you know, either they lose their jobs or they end up getting arrested. So I
high risk behavior.
You know, a lot of drinking goes on. You know, a lot of risky behavior. So as I think back now, I was one of the blessed ones that I feel like I came out of the other side, you know, better than I started. But I still believe that we can do so much more. I'll give you one example. You know, we we law enforcement in general does a great job in doing psychological examinations for police officers before they enter the profession. Yet we do nothing similar to that to select officers that are going to engage on daily engagements with things that are not normal. So, we do nothing to not only select these officers, but also follow up with them on a consistent basis. You can spend 30 years on a SWAT team and no one talk to you about mental health. And that, to me, it's an issue. I think that's a gap. It's a huge gap that should be worked on, and that's why I'm here today.
So there's no national model. What are your thoughts, David? Please, as a former chief, nearly 30 some odd years of law enforcement.
You're going to see the worst of the worst. I mean, SWAT doesn't get called out unless it's something violent, aside from dignitary protection, unless it's something violent that's going to happen, and hopefully, and usually it ends well.
Excuse me, but
And
that's what happens.
and it happens with any cop worth his or her weight in salt that's on the street, a good street cop. You don't know what's coming. I will go back to a point you made before, though, having outside interest. And I remember back in the academy, they said, don't lose the friends you have that aren't cops. And I think all too often, I'm fortunate enough I kept the same friends I had since we were in elementary school. They're not cops. Of course, I have a lot of friends that are cops, but to tell the story over and over, the war stories over and over and over again without outside interest, I want to talk to you about why I think the Beatles are the greatest rock group ever.
Absolutely.
That's a conversation to have, not how I, got into a shootout with somebody 2 years ago or a decade ago.
And
No.
we do get trapped in our war
We get
stories.
trapped in the war stories, but the question is, and I don't know the answer, but does that bring it from the subconscious back up again, that now you're reliving it? Because if you're telling the story, with a beer in your hand, that's one thing. But if you have to bring it up and relive it and relive these traumatic experiences over and over, it doesn't go away. It just keeps gnawing at you until sooner or later, it gnaws right through the wood and the chair falls over because the leg is gone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the last 5-6 minutes that we have here, time flies. How do we address this? Because this is an issue. Think about the fact that most large agencies have a SWAT, right? Department or unit, right?
Mhm.
And the reality that these officers are going into the worst case scenarios and they're experiencing the worst humanity has to offer is high possibility. So how do we address that? And how do we trickle that down to the line officer?
I don't think I have the answer either, but I'm going to offer some insight that I think by having this program and me being able to have a platform here
Mm-hmm.
and talk to my SWAT brothers and sisters out there, and make sure that they know that there's help, and they know that if
They're not alone.
they're not alone, you're never alone, and if you're feeling a certain way, please don't ignore it. Do
It's a strength,
something.
right? It's a
It's
strength.
a strength to
Right.
come out and talk about things. So
But there's fear, Frank. There's fear
There's
of
always
being
that.
taken off the line,
Absolutely.
taken off duty, right?
there's a
David?
stigma. There's a stigma.
Stigma.
That SWAT officer needs to walk around that police station like a SWAT officer, and that's what's expected of us. If there was, I'll give you an example. SWAT officers, at least in the Miami PD at the time, were part-time SWAT officers, full-time police officers. So you're working patrol, you got a call out, go out, do your call out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 hours, and the next day you're right back in patrol. So that cycle it never stopped.
The fact that they're continuously going through this and there's an expectation.
So yes, there's an expectation that you perform at 100% everywhere you work. I'll give you another example. As I went up the rank and became a lieutenant, if a SWAT officer was not carrying his weight in patrol for whatever reason, I will get a phone call and say, "Hey, this is a SWAT guy. What's going on with this guy? This guy's only producing, so many tickets or so many. What's he doing?" Well, thinking back now, maybe there was a reason why that officer was not producing. But back then, the expectation was that if that officer was not producing, he was not the highest producer in that squad and patrol, they will get removed from the team.
Well, much was expected of a SWAT person, right?
It still is.
In the NFL, You take a shot to the head, you're in the NFL protocol. Boxing, you get knocked out, you can't get licensed for the next fight until you get cleared, right? Perhaps there needs to be something along those same lines when there's a traumatic experience that you sit them down for a little bit. Doesn't mean you're going to cure them, but give them time to talk. Again, the talking is the strength. Keeping it bottled up inside you doesn't mean you're weak, but it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. The strength is in talking in that escape valve, right? The lid on that stove with the escape valve, the lid's not going to go through the roof, right? Because you got the steam coming out somewhere, right? It's the same thing here. You have to open up and talk. These men and women have seen stuff that we can only imagine, unless you've walked that walk in some shape or form in law enforcement, right? It isn't going to be from sitting behind a desk. And that's not to say that doesn't have its own stresses, but you have to look at the odds of who's going to have the most stress, right? And rising right to the top would be special response team, SWAT team, and how they deal with it. It will make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure and an honor.
No, bro, this is for you. This is
to
for
be
our
able
brothers and
to
sisters.
share a little bit. We should do this again. But to my brothers and sisters again that are out there, you're not alone. It's what you're feeling. If you're feeling something, it's normal, and you should reach out to help. There are things that are going to pop up. There are things that are going to haunt you, and they're going to go away. They're going to come back. Those are symptoms of PTSD, and the awareness has to be there. The stigma needs to go away, and I only hope that police agencies in the United States of America take a look at this and see that when we expose our citizens to this type of events, they should have someone looking out after them, and someone creating some sort of protocols for police agencies to make sure that these people are healthy and come out the other side healthy.
Proactive,
100%.
proactive, not reactive.
Correct.
Last thoughts?
I think you said it. You said it all, but there's so much more to be said. But this was good. This was good to get it out there. And let's stay on top of it. Proactivity is always the answer.
Yeah, man. So for anyone that's suffering with suicide ideations or intent on hurting anyone else, please reach out to the national hotline if you feel that there's nobody else you can speak with. You're not alone. That's 988. There's someone there to answer your calls. Drop us a line. Let us know how you're feeling. Let's talk about it. For those of you that have been watching, those of you that will see this video, we can't stress enough our gratitude to our brother, Francisco Frank Fernandez, the Assistant Chief of the City of Sweetwater in Miami, Florida, to the Millers, Miami's community news team, our producer behind the scenes, Amber. We can't thank you enough. To you, the audience, look forward to speaking with you next time. This has been another episode of Bets and Badges. You can find us on all podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, iHeart, and Amazon. Give us a shot. Join us. We'll talk to you next time.